Hello, hello. Welcome to week 2. This is so exciting of hypnosis training. Hopefully you all have gotten your book, Discover the Language of the Mind, A Hypnotist's Guide to Psycholinguistics by Dr. Patrick Porter. So let's just do real quick. I'm going to screen share and we're just going to, this is actually a handout that I'm going to give to you guys a little bit later. And we are just going to review just for a second here. So this is hypnosis training day number 2. So today we're going to be going over a review. We're going to talk about why the language of the mind and what that actually means. We're going to discover your lead system by taking a little survey, which you're totally going to love. So hopefully you've got some pen and paper and or a printer. And we are going to show you how to see, hear, and feel better now, whether this is for yourself or this is for your clients and friends. So let's just review real quick about what we talked about last week. And don't worry, I will send out in the email tonight with this recording. I will also link last week's recording just in case anybody missed that. So first off, we demystified hypnosis and we began to understand how, there's a saying, either everything is hypnosis or nothing is hypnosis. And the idea that people come to me as a hypnotherapist because they continue to do something that they don't want to do anymore, whether it's an action, a physical action, or whether it's a thought that keeps ruminating, that's keeping them from what they want to do. Sometimes it looks like stress, it looks like anxiety, it looks like binge eating, it looks like all kinds of different things in our life, but they're continuing to do something that they're like, wait a minute, I know I should have more control over this in my life. And obviously I don't. So how do I take back control of my mind? And that's really what hypnosis is about. It's the idea of going into an altered state for a particular purpose. And when we learn more about our brainwave patterns and how they work and why they work, we begin to realize, oh, well, no wonder it's really quite challenging. And we're pushing a giant boulder uphill when we try to make changes either in our actions or our thinking when we are in a state of stress, fear, resentment, frustration, irritation, anger, shame, guilt, remorse. It's so funny because oftentimes that's when we feel motivated right, to make a change, but lasting change very rarely is sustained when we are in that mind state of stress and anxiety and frustration. So we have to calm ourselves down before we can actually see clearly what the options and possibilities are available to us and take that next right, divinely inspired action. Right. And that's really the kicker here, is getting back in touch with ourselves. It's not about anyone else controlling us. It's about us being in touch with our own intuition and guidance system. So we explained hypnosis a little bit, just the simple way that the mind works. And again, the mind is, less like a robot, and I think a computer system is probably a better analogy to describe the functioning here. And we'll talk more about that today, of course, but the idea is that we experience the world through our senses and also through our imagination. So it is actually, heard and taste and touch and smell is also in our imagination. We did the little lemon test and that was fun last week. We talked about interviewing, the idea of gathering the kind of information that is helpful. Now, again, whether this is for yourself or whether this is for people that you're working with or even people that you love, right? This is about communication. It's about communication with our own self and understanding that. It's about communication with other people. It's about syncing up in that way, and all relationships benefit when we have this skill set. So some of the questions to ask is, I'm sorry, this is more about how to transform a negative thought into a positive one. So when people say, well, I don't want you to do this anymore, it's like, okay, totally. What would you like me to do then? right? And just getting more clarity, more clarity. And Lord knows we all need to work on this, right? Like anytime you're in a relationship with somebody else, you know, you live with them, you work with them, you're raising them, whatever it is, there is always an opportunity for more clarity because, you know, I mean, how many times have you started in the middle of a sentence and someone else is like, I don't even know what you're talking about. Right? It's like, oh yeah, let me give you the full 360 of like how I came to this conclusion. And then when we're talking about behavior, how to convert a state, so like an emotional state into a behavior. So it's like, okay, I totally get that you're feeling frustrated. Like, what do we need to do? And sometimes what we need to do is nothing. Sometimes what we need to do is relax or go for a walk. It's not always an action that's necessarily looks like going in the direction that we want to go in. And then the next idea here is being specific, right? What is it that you actually want? We talked about actually in my review, we talked about suggestibility tests. So this is you know, kind of fun to do. There's the book and the balloon where like you have your hand out and the book is really heavy and it's getting heavier and heavier, and you have your other hand out like this. You start off with her both together, you close your eyes, and then you imagine that there's a balloon tied to this hand and this one's getting lighter and lighter and the other one's getting heavier and heavier. And you give those suggestions while the person has their eyes closed. Do that with one of your kids or like someone that you live with. It's super fun to just kind of like see in real life, like how the mind and the imagination creates an experience, right? How our thinking creates feelings inside of us. And then we respond and react to life based on those feelings. And so really, this is the very beginning stages of taking emotional maturity to the next level, right? And really being intentional about taking back control of our own mind and our own lives. So we also talked about induction and the idea that, you know, when we are doing guided meditations, visualizations, hypnosis in this way, that we want to slow down, take our time, breathe, lower our tone a bit. And just this understanding that when we are asking questions, typically our tone goes up. When we are making a statement, it's typically neutral. And when we are making a command, it's usually down. You know, again, if any of us have children or people that we use words to try and motivate them to do things, it's typically, right, when you get to the point, like first, it's like, hey, can you help me with this? And it's a question. Then it's like, hey, I really need help with this. Excuse me, I need your help now. Right? We notice how we start off in the question area, we get neutral, and then it's like, this is serious, right? So we kind of come down in our tone, which is, again, totally natural, normal ways of communicating. And when we are being intentional with ourselves, sometimes it is appropriate to kind of be a little bit lighter, and sometimes it's appropriate to be more commanding. Typically in hypnosis, you want it to be a bit more of a lower, slower command pace, or neutral is okay too. We went through a sample induction where I put on some music and I just read through here, and we got a nice relaxation session. There are some convincers that can be helpful for you as someone doing a process on somebody else, or sometimes it's kind of fun for yourself as well. Just the ideas of noticing your legs getting really heavy and then trying to move them and then realizing that you just can't, or really it's that you just don't want to, right? It's like heavy, yeah, I'm cool, I'm relaxing. You can do the same with the eyelids. The eyelids are getting heavier and heavier. You can do the same with the arms are getting heavier and heavier. And then always you want to cancel that suggestion and say, okay, now the heaviness is gone. You can go back with your day. There are some therapeutic ideas here, just the way that the brain works. We love symbols, we love metaphors, we love symbol stories that parallel the client's outcome. We loved end result imagery, really getting into how is it actually going to be tomorrow when you've made the changes, next week, next year? How did these changes actually right, move into your future? And if you've done a good interview process, then you have a lot of that data and information to put into the session. And if it's just for yourself, you know, it's like you're becoming more aware, more intentional What am I thinking? What do I want to be thinking? Where are the ways and places in my life that I could increase my awareness? And then of course there's direct suggestions, which are just, authoritative commands and our hypnotic suggestions. And then of course, the idea of bringing us back up. So instead of going down from 10 to 1, we're now going up from 1 to 5 and giving the suggestion that we are feeling good, everything is okay, and this is so. Those words, and this is so, or and so it is, or and let it be, or let it be so, those are all similar to the word amen. Right? So amen just means boom, let it be. Okay. So you can see how really a lot of this is prayer and action. Okay? A lot of this is really speaking to ourselves, speaking to our divine connection, speaking to that part of ourselves that is calm, that is connected, that knows, that is at peace, right? Our other part of our brain can really get wild during the day. So it's nice to have a process where we can come together and relax a bit. Alrighty, so now is a great time to grab your book as we kind of dive a little bit more into what is the language of the mind. And so I know, Margie, your book is still in the mail. That's beautiful. So I'm just going to do a little bit of reading to you then. Okay, so in the preface, it says, and this is on page V, Roman numeral 5, there are many abilities of the mind that we humans have in common. Our minds all process information from a foundation of our 5 primary sense access systems that are known as our senses. These are visual, auditory, kinesthetic, which is tactile and or emotional feelings, and our sense of smell, which is olfactory, or taste, gustatory. These 5 senses help our minds process the world around us. Many will, of course, argue over a 6th sense, and he says that I think a 6th sense is just when all the senses are working together. So all the senses work together to create your perception of reality. Now, this is not to be confused with reality itself. Just ask 2 eyewitnesses who were at the same event at the same time to describe what they saw and heard at the scene. Don't be surprised when completely different versions are described to you. Now, when touching into the language of the mind, you are dealing with perceptions of reality or an individual's inner map and guideline, not reality itself. Perceptions are the guidelines people use to define and achieve personal success. Therefore, success is a state of mind. Now, this is in all areas of our life, personal, professional, when it comes to our health, our relationships, our wealth. All of this starts with our mind. I'm moving to the next page here. Just like a computer, the brain, which is the hardware, and the mind, which is the software, require programming and specific steps and sequences before you can gain access. Once you have found that access, the only limits are those that you set. Whew. If you've ever attempted to program a computer, which I personally have not, but I can only imagine, you know exactly what I mean. The computer has certain laws that must be followed exactly, or it will not do the function that you wish it to perform, no matter how frustrated or upset you get. A computer will simply wait patiently for you to make the command according to its law. When you finally learn the laws of the computer and follow them to the letter, it will happily and effortlessly perform the function you desire. So it is with the mind. If you attempt to make changes in your life without ever gaining access to the laws that are working in your mind, it will either do nothing at all, or perhaps will bring you an outcome that is much different from the one that you had set out to achieve. Now, over the last few weeks, we've been talking a lot about that in the group when we have these ideas of what we want, but then we have conflicting belief patterns. right? And so we're not utilizing and accessing the actual language of our own mind and making sure that the road of success is paved properly, because we have set our own obstacles along the way of this is unacceptable, this is acceptable, this is unacceptable, this is okay, this is safe, this is not safe. And so understanding that process is very, very helpful. Moving to the next, moving to page Roman numeral 8 at the top of the page here. Okay, so creating permanent behavior change takes much more than simply putting someone into a hypnotic trance, which is the main thrust of most standard hypnosis techniques. Much more important is having the skill to present the new information so the biocomputer, the brain, can truly assimilate it and then feed it back during your day-to-day activities as effective and permanent behavior change. The law of the mind is the law of the belief, and there are no limits to consciousness. All right, awesome. So that was just a couple little excerpts from the preface in the book, Discover the Language of the Mind. I highly recommend that you just grab this and read it cover to cover. It has got some really great information. Obviously, in this class, we're going to kind of like bop through what I think is the most important things. I am going to read just a couple more pages here where he explains what is psycholinguistics. So psycholinguistics, and I'm on page 1, is a series of patterns designed around strategies rather than problems, which is really cool because what that means is that we can access our biocomputer and make changes without having to constantly dive deep into the dramas and traumas of the past. Sometimes that's necessary and helpful, but not always, right? If you've told that story 2,000 times, you don't need to tell it anymore, right? Therapists using most standard techniques will find it necessary to recreate the sensitive information surrounding the experience and then confront the patient on a conscious level, usually reproducing all of the pain and suffering as well. Also, the mechanics of most therapies infer that in some way the problem could have been avoided. The Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous, however, points out that knowledge does not cure make. On every pack of cigarettes, the Surgeon General warns that cigarette smoking is hazardous to your health, yet millions of people, even with the knowledge that each inhalation destroys their body, will continue to practice the habit without skipping a beat. Why? This question is what first inspired me to look into alternative theories using a more solution-driven approach. How to become a non-smoker, rather than a problem-driven approach, why you are a smoker. Now, I wanted to understand what could possibly motivate such curious behavior. This was the answer I was seeking when I started my research. What I discovered during that search is what subsequently inspired psycholinguistic patterns, which I outlined here. Psycholinguistics bases its results on the reality that we all learn behaviors through life experience, and we construct that truth as memories, which are stored through the sensory channels, the auditory, the visual, the kinesthetic, and of course, smell and taste. Through the psycholinguistic processes, I will demonstrate how people are able to change their thinking processes and in turn change their lives. The findings are based on the hands-on results gathered through research at our Positive Changes centers, which is where I worked for 5 years, and it was awesome. By reviewing the origins of psycholinguistics with an emphasis on just how the patterns were developed, you will begin to get the feel for what psycholinguistics is and hopefully for what deeper meaning it will have in your search for a positive change. In the simplest terms, psycholinguistics is a usable, rapid, and efficient method for accessing your mind or another individual's mind and making changes to behaviors, attitudes, and/or thought patterns. Psycholinguistics is a combined study and theory of the processes of neuro-linguistic programming, or NLP, hypnosis, self-talk, creative visualization, imagery, accelerated learning, and Ericksonian hypnosis. It is through the use of all of the above mentioned methods that I developed psycholinguistics, the language of the mind. The results achieved with this technology are based on the impact made to the individual's thinking process, rather than on gaining a greater insight into the person's problems. This is not to suggest that modern psychology does not deal with this issue. It's simply handled in a different way. If one's goal is to impact a person's mind, there is much more involved than simply accessing an altered state or even saying the right words. One must say it in the right order and in the format acceptable to that individual's mind. To influence the mind, one must communicate in a language with which it can relate. The patterns of psycholinguistics are designed to accelerate the process and make the change permanent. Through extensive research with real people expressing real problems, I have come to the conclusion that the problem has no relevancy to the solution. This is what I think is the most beautiful part of this. This can be likened to physical illness in that the symptom is not the disease. If medical doctors treated only symptoms, their cure rate would be next to nil, which it is with many things, lifestyle stuff, right? Because we don't have a pill deficiency. None of us have a pill deficiency. Right? Understand that each person's mind is goal striving and will do its best with whatever information is at hand, right? Always respecting and loving with compassion any action or thought that we take. It's there for a reason. Now, do we want to detour and go somewhere else often? Yes, of course. And we'll learn how to do that. In other words, each individual simply needs to discover the unconscious triggers or previous programming involved and make the appropriate adjustments. When done correctly, the modification allows for a free flow of communication through all channels so a new and more appropriate choice can be made. Our minds are designed to create what we are mentally rehearsing. Right? We thought about that beliefs are just thoughts that we repeat over and over and over again. And then we go, well, it must be true. This is hard. This is hard. This is hard. It's always been like this. This is this way. Right? That's just thoughts that we thought. And then we repeated them over and over and over. And we selected things that validated that. And that's it. Okay. So our minds are designed to create what we are mentally rehearsing. Unfortunately, this is not always what we wanted or intended. If one's other than conscious mind is convinced that one is a failure and has been rehearsing failure through mental movies and continuous reruns, then one will become successful at failure. Oh, Lord have mercy. And obviously there's areas of all of our lives where we're like, why am I rehearsing failure? Or we can look at other people and go, dude, you've got so much potential. You got so much potential, just get out of your own way. And they just can't or won't. They don't know how. But you know what? We're learning and we can teach them. Okay. On the other hand, should one rehearse success while in an altered state of awareness, so that relaxed state where opportunities and possibilities are available to us, not just positive affirmations, but a full sensory experience, right? Just like the lemon, where we were really there cutting the lemon open and tasting it. It's like our whole body, right? Invigorated with it. Not just positive affirmations, a full sensory experience, and one will experience success, because at that level of thinking, the mental rehearsal and the physical action will be stored in equal measure. Meaning when we rehearse actually doing it and get into that good feeling of actually achieving what we want to, and rehearse it over and over and over in a relaxed state, then that memory of the imagined thing becomes a memory, just like all the other memories. Through physical and mental rehearsal, it will soon come to pass as reality. One of my main purposes in developing these non-contextual techniques was for the use by trainers who want to offer group processing. With psycholinguistics, the individual participants are able to audit themselves and make the appropriate changes using the step-by-step procedures. Once learned, the results can be tested and adjustments can be made on a day-to-day basis. Right? Because sometimes we're like, oh, this is the right, it's this path. And then we're like, meh, not that one. Okay, cool. Let's go over here. This concept allows the theory of Alcoholics Anonymous one day at a time, or it follows the theory one day at a time. And then there's a quote here that I just love this quote. William James said in 1842, or that was when he was born, so somewhere around 1900, the greatest discovery of my generation is that a human being can alter his life by altering his attitudes of mind. Yes. So cool. Okay, so now we're going to get into, I'm skipping forward to page 48. And on page 48, we're going to be talking about lead systems. So we're going to get a little bit deeper into the visual, auditory, and kinesthetic. Now, of course, the olfactory and the gustatory, so the sense of smell and taste, are definitely a factor. And especially for us, right, who get triggered by smells, foodie type smells, we'll deal with that a little bit later and we can add those in, but I really want you just to understand the lead ones, which are typically visual, auditory, kinesthetic. So each of us have prefers, this is on page 48, preferences on how we like information presented to us. This is termed your lead system. So very visual people. Some like to see what you mean, right? They're like, I don't see what you mean. I can't really see myself doing that. You'll notice the words that they use typically. I mean, all of us use all of the words, of course, and it depends on what it is. I mean, if it's a sound, then of course, like I can't hear that. But typically you'll notice, you guys will probably notice if you've been with me for a while that I say things like, I feel you, right? Or I'm not feeling that, right? That is a very typical thing for me to say. I am very highly kinesthetic. I'm very emotional. I am very driven by emotions and my feelings. I like to touch things. And that is like my lead system. It's actually like in a tie for auditory, which totally makes sense too, because I talk a lot. Right? Auditory people are often talkers, but they're also like very sensitive to the world. Like any little sound of something, like they can't sleep if there's sound, like, or they need sound to sleep. Like they're just very, auditory people are funny. Okay, so a lead auditory is something, some like to hear your idea, right? Where they say like, tell me more, I want to hear it. Very kinesthetic people will say something like, they like to experience or feel what you're talking about. So we also have preferences for the way that we evaluate and analyze information. Some decide by how things look to them. It's obviously very visual. Some decide by how things sound to them, very auditory. Some decide by how things feel to them. That's very kinesthetic. Generally, people take in information and communicate in all systems, of course. People can have one kind of preference for gathering information and another kind for interpreting it. For example, looking at a new car, but then buying it because it feels right. You will find the client much more receptive if your ideas are presented in a way that he or she prefers. This is actually kind of fun too. The more that you understand this as you're in conversations with people that you care about and that you love, and you're just noticing that like, we're just not communicating, like they're just not feeling what I'm saying. Once you start to use their words and their lead system, it's like all of a sudden they're open and they can understand what you're saying more. It's really fun. So how, you might ask, do I know what a person's preferences are? Fortunately, most people will give you cues that are quite obvious when you know what you're looking for. Have you ever heard the term, the eyes are the mirror to the soul? There is a great deal of truth to this statement. By watching the sequences of eye movement, you will soon discover a pattern. By simply observing this pattern, you will learn just how that person gets to a yes, and the mystery is solved. So this kind of training is actually what they give to salespeople. Because it's really important to make sure that you're using the language in the system that the person is relating to most. You want to know what it is that they're looking for and then show them that. Okay, so when people are processing of communicating, they are definite signs. Okay, ask a specific question. What are the physical cues? Okay, so in order to access the visual processing, it is necessary to ask a question that evokes a visual answer. A question that involves sound or feeling will not work. So what are the visual preference words? I see what you mean. I can visualize it. That looks good to me. Let me get a perspective. I drew a blank. I need to focus on that. How do you identify visual processing? So the eyes tell you when the person is looking for information or visualizing, and typically the eyes will go up. When we are visualizing something, it's like, it's an up. And it's up in one direction if you are visual, like if you like, it's a memory that you're remembering visually what it looked like. And you go to the other side when you are like making up an image. Right? People go, I don't know, like what kind of dress do you want to wear? And it's like, right? You're going up. You might go back to like the ones that you've worn before, and that's the memory over here. But then you're like, no, I think I'd look better in a red dress. Right? It's really interesting. They may be accessing a remembered or a constructed image or creating a picture. Okay. Okay, so exercise. Okay, so exercise building visual acuity. So an exercise, something that you could practice beefing up your visual sense, is walking into a room of your house, looking around for about 10 seconds, then walk into another room and write down everything that you remember seeing in that room. This is to increase visual acuity and also to increase your observational skills. Okay, so what about auditory? What are the physical cues to auditory processing? So when auditory processing is taking place, the subject's eyes will move towards the ears, either the left or the right. So it's kind of like just in the middle, but to one side or the other. It's almost as if the brain is listening to the data. And it's interesting too, if you ever do a hypnosis session with someone, like you sit them down and you read through one of the scripts and you go like nice and slow and you pace yourself with their breathing and you kind of get into that flow and they start to relax, you'll notice that their eyelids will start to go like this, because as they're listening to your voice, they're hearing you. It's really fun. So what are auditory preference words? I hear what you're saying. Your idea sounds good to me. Now that's an earful. Oh, that story rings a bell. I can't tell you where I've heard that before. So, okay. So here's a little exercise of letting it go. This is a really nice one. And in fact, I hope you take this exercise with you forever. It's called letting go. Amen, right? I mean, that's like the $1 million question. How do I let go of that? I get that I need to, I want to, but like, how do I do it? So this is one of the ways to do it, especially accessing the auditory. So think of a negative voice. Perhaps you will recall a voice from the past or a voice pitch that is irritating to you. Now imagine the pitch of that voice slowly going higher and higher and higher and higher and higher and higher and higher until it is out of your range of hearing. Imagine that you can just place it on the moon. You know where it is. It's just out of your hearing range. So now think of a negative voice. Once again, imagine the pitch going lower and lower and lower until it is out of your hearing range. At the same time, imagine it slowing down and moving deeper and further into the earth until it is at the very center. When you bring the voice up again, you are now able to hear it in a different way. So if so, then you can move on. Now, if not, if it's the same, then repeat the process a couple more times and get really good at making it so high pitched that you can't even hear it and place it on the moon, or drown it out and it's so low and slow that you can't even understand it. You place it down in the center of the earth. Repeat this process each time. Leave the voice at different ends of the spectrum, from speeding it up, placing it on the moon, slowing it down, placing it down in the center of the earth. Now, the purpose of this exercise is to allow your mind to represent the auditory information in a new way. If you give the mind all options, which means the option of going very low to a stop or very high until it's out of your hearing, then the brain will store it in the most appropriate way for you. Since the negative voice is not a voice that you would want to have in your future, the brain, knowing this and always making the best decision, will store it as hyperamnesia, or out of your hearing. This is the selective ability to remember what you want to remember when you want to remember it. In actuality, we do this all the time without knowing it. Now, this technique of letting go is appropriate, very appropriate for many places in life, but it's also a really good one to use with many cases of unconscious overeating, such as someone who hears an internal voice from the past relating certain beliefs about food. So cool, right? Or that itty bitty shitty committee, like just the dialogue that goes on. Okay, the word represent refers to giving the other than conscious mind a new way to present information to the conscious mind based on new beliefs and experiences. All right, so the next one is kinesthetic, right? When accessing kinesthetically, you're accessing feelings. When a person is looking down and to the right, he or she is usually getting in touch with the feelings and emotions, right? What are kinesthetic preference words? I feel that we have made a great breakthrough. Let me get a handle on what you're talking about. You've given me a solid understanding of your point. Please tackle this assignment as soon as you can. I haven't been able to grasp the concept. Notice how those are all very kinesthetic, either feeling or emotion. How do you identify kinesthetic processing? Well, there's eye movement for kinesthetic processors involves looking down and to the right. 80% of all people tested look down and to the right for accessing emotions and to judge their physical state. So oftentimes when we look down and to the right, I'm not sure if this is backwards or forwards for you, but whatever. It's when you're looking at the person, it's to your right. You know, it's really interesting when we have children and we are tall and we are standing above them and we are talking to them in a way that might require them to access their feelings and emotions. And then we yell at them to look at us, look at me while I'm talking to you, which takes them out of their feelings and their emotions and puts them in their visual sense looking at you. And now they don't have access to those feelings, and we wonder why they're not communicating with us properly or effectively, or why they can't access their feelings. It's really challenging when we don't understand the way that the mind and the body work together. When it comes to, and this is not in the book, this is actually a whole nother course that I took on communication processing, is that very auditory people, they'll need to block off a lot of the mind's chatter to focus on something. And so they'll often cross their arms like this. And, you know, it's often been said in psychology, that's a defensive move, that they're protecting, that, you know, people, whatever. But if you're an auditory person, crossing your arms or your legs, it shuts off part of your brain that is the chattering part and helps you focus on what the person is actually saying. Isn't that fascinating? When I learned that, it changed my whole perception of what I thought was, especially being a teacher, oh my God, a high school teacher. And just, there were so many things that the kids did that I was like, this is disrespectful. They're not listening. They're not paying attention. And it's like, no, you actually don't know that. You don't know that because all of the things that we were taught about what someone who's paying attention does, they sit still in their place and look at you while they're processing information, not accurate. People who are super kinesthetic need to doodle, right? I mean, that's also an auditory thing. So highly auditory, highly kinesthetic, you'll be doodling while you're talking. And that drives me freaking nuts, right? Some of my students, they get up out of their chair and they're walking around, and I know that they're kinesthetic. You know, other kids, like, they have to be having conversation while I'm talking. And I'm like, dude. So what's funny is having conversation while they're actually listening to somebody else. Auditory people can totally do that. But if you're the person sitting a couple seats over and the teacher's trying to talk, but you're hearing the side conversation, it's like the most annoying thing ever. Or when someone's clicking on their pen, Lord help me. The person who is auditory will do that because it helps them focus, but everyone around them is just like, please stop it. Okay, so kinesthetic. How do you identify kinesthetic processing? Okay, so we already talked about that. Okay, so what is auditory digital processing? The auditory system consists of both pure sound and the spoken word. Since each is represented differently in the brain, NLP considers language or auditory digital a separate representational system from pure sound or auditory tone. So auditory tone is the side to side, and auditory digital is down to the left. The term digital is used because words are verbal symbols or digits. As explained in the auditory section, when self-talk is occurring and the person is accessing internal dialogue, the eyes will move down and to your right, but it's their left. Since language is involved, this is also termed auditory digital. There's actually a little like map graph in here on page 58, because whatever, left, right, facing, what is even happening? Okay, so how do we, again, if people are processing information of what you are saying, the words that you're saying, and they're looking down, that can feel super disrespectful. But you have to understand the way that the brain works. They have to look down to process what it is that you're saying. Lord help me. Lord help us all. Okay, how to identify the person's lead system. Now, this is where we're going to get into and have a super good time now. I'm going to share screen and show you this little beauty right here. This is a little quiz that I, of course, copied from somebody else to access or to understand if we are more auditory, visual, or kinesthetic. So if you want to print this out, awesome. It will be in your email, obviously. And if you want to just kind of like go through, and I'll make these a little bit bigger. Pause this right here, do a little pause on your video recording and go through each of these questions. So for number one, it's either agree or disagree. You got to pick one, right? There's no middle of the ground. It's either an agree or a disagree. So if it's 51%, you know, put the 51%, put the agree or disagree. Okay, so my friends know me as a good listener. So jot that number in there. I prefer movies with a relaxed pace. And what? I got some editing errors here. Relaxed pace and a plot. That's funny. That slowly unwinds over those that are full of action, noise, and special effects. So either agree or you disagree. And then you put your numbers down here and you add them up. So they're either 5s or 10s, 5s or 10s, 5s or 10s. Put them in there, add them up, and then you'll get if you are more auditory, visual, or kinesthetic. So whenever I do it, my auditory and kinesthetic are like tied at like 85, and my visual is like 40. It's not really 40, but it's like super low, which is totally makes sense, right? I talk a lot and I'm a doer. And the way that things like visually look are not as important to me as the way that they feel, right? Totally makes sense. All right, so I'm going to stop share now. So if you were wanting to look at this, just pause it. All righty. So what I really wanted to do also is have you go through just maybe we'll just do it together. And you can just take a moment to relax. Okay, optimize for sound. Yes, perfect. So I'm going to play some nice music. Oops. And I'm just going to read through the first paragraph of the induction, the sample induction that we did together last week. And now that you have your visual, auditory, and kinesthetic your lead system, I want you to just close your eyes and take a moment to notice where in this paragraph, in this process, do you see the visual, auditory, and kinesthetic? Where are the suggestions about sound? Where are the suggestions about visualizing? Where are the suggestions about feeling? So as you sit back, relax, and just close your eyes. In a few moments, you're going to be more relaxed than you've ever known yourself to be. I'm going to mention certain parts of your body. And as I do, I want you to just feel that part begin to relax. Just feel that part begin to relax now. In order to help you relax, I want you to imagine yourself in a wonderfully magical forest. It's almost nighttime, and the sky is a beautiful indigo blue. The stars are coming out, and the moon is lighting up the rich forest trees. Off in the distance, you hear the hypnotic sounds of a bubbling brook, and the soft sound of crickets seem to be lulling you to sleep. And as you remain motionless, you begin noticing a wonderfully white light just above your head. This white light is the most relaxing light you could imagine. And as it begins to lower around the crown of your head, you seem to be touched with a desire and willingness to relax deeper and deeper with every breath you take. Continuing lower now, begins to touch your forehead, smoothing out your forehead and relaxing that space right between your eyebrows. Now, you feel this relaxing light moving down around your eyes. Your eyelids seem to become very, very heavy. So heavy they don't even seem to want to open. They may flutter a bit, but that's okay. Just feel how heavy they are. And as the relaxation comes down around the facial muscles and tendons, now all the muscles in the facial area just begin to relax. Noticing the different visual cues, the auditory suggestions, the kinesthetic guidance. There's no need to worry how all of this is going to come together. Your mind is taking and processing information gathering it and putting it in just the right order, in just the right place, at just the right time. Now, in a moment, it's going to be time for you to awaken, to come back to full consciousness, with a new understanding of yourself and the world around you, a deeper perspective. It's going to help you and serve you through the days and the weeks and the months to come, as you continue expanding your understanding of yourself, the incredible power of your mind. I'm going to count up now from 1 to 5, and when we get to 5, you will be feeling fantastic. 1, noticing the chair that you are resting in, the way it supports your body. 2, taking in a deep breath and allowing that life-giving and forgiving oxygen to move deep into the cells and systems and the organs of your body, regenerating, rejuvenating. 3, becoming more and more aware of this body, this incredible body and the connection with the mind. Deep, powerful, loving connection. 4, realizing that you have everything that you need and that all things are working out for you. They always have, and they always will. And 5, wide awake now, feeling fine and in perfect health, feeling better than before. And this is so. All righty, ladies, that was fantastic. I'm so excited for you to get this recording. I will put all of this in a beautiful email. Obviously, if you are listening to it, then you already know. I love you so much. I'm so excited for next week. We're going to dive a little bit more into actually getting you guys to be practicing with each other. Very exciting. Really accessing the hypnotic mind. All right. I love you. I'll see you next week. Bye.